home the gold medal, that is Great Britain's Kelly Hodgson, who was able to take the gold medal of the 800 meters final, and we'll be linking up with our very own Bernard Okum, who has been covering this live session of the 2024 Paris Olympics in later on. But for now, we want to discuss current affairs matters, especially following the vetting exercise that was concluded on a Sunday by the National Assembly's appointment vetting committee, led by none other than the Speaker of the National Assembly. This is a conversation that I'll be steering. My name is Abdiaziz Hashim. The sign language interpreter at the bottom end of the screen is Anne Wangeshi. Now, a little bit of context before we head over to our conversation is that now the fate of the 20 nominees who were vetted by the Moses Wetangula's led committee now lies in the hands of those members before it is taken to the plenary. Now, the vetting process comes against the backdrop of an aggressive push by Kenyans to ensure only people with integrity join the cabinet, the broad-based cabinet that has been formed by none other than President William Ruto. The dissolution of the previous cabinet by President William Ruto followed weeks of sustained protest in the country and demanded far-reaching reforms, including overhaul of the cabinet, of course, which even led to the austerity measures being included to that particular retrospect. Now, according to a statement read by Wetangula on Sunday, clearly stated that they received over 1,300 submissions from Kenyans who raised issues with some or one of the CS nominees. Wetangula said the submissions were either generally opposed by the appointment of one or more nominees, repetitive support of the nominees, or even unrelated to the process itself. He further assured that the process will be upheld in the highest standards possible. Now, you may ask, the million-dollar question is, what next after vetting? Now, after the vetting process, the committee is expected to table a report on each nominee, recommending either their approval or rejection based on the assessment of their qualification and suitability of their roles. Now, that, of course, will be followed up by a plenary where the members of Parliament will have a chance to talk about some of the nominees who have been either approved or have been rejected by the Moses Wetangula-led committee. You saw what happened in the last CS vetting, where Penina Malonza, who was then nominated for the position of a tourism docket, was rejected by the committee, but the House later resolved to appoint her and approve her appointment for the position back then. Now, thereafter, the CS approval, once approved, they will take the oath of office, pledging allegiance to the country, the people of Kenya, and the Constitution. Now, you do know those names will be running there, the 20 CS nominees who have been vetted, but there are two outstanding cabinet secretaries. No, just one cabinet secretary and an attorney general who are expected to be vetted come Friday, this August 9th, and there will be the last two, and that will be Dorcas Oduor, who has been nominated for the position of the attorney general, and the regional development CS nominee, Beatrice School. They will be vetted on Friday, and as per usual, KBC will be bringing you live those vetting sessions, as has been the case for the last 4 days or so. Now, joining me in the studio to converse on these issues is Brian Mongera, a governance and policy expert who has been in these particular sectors, especially in the transport, housing, energy, petroleum, and telecommunication. Further, Brian, you have had various experience abroad. Now, given that you have seen the procedure that has been carried out here in the country for the last 4 days or so, which is very crucial in the country, you do know that this has been in the backdrop of many agitation by the Kenyan youth to look for a cabinet that is competent and is carried in the highest regard possible. So what have you made of the process so far, given that you have been following up the proceedings?
Yeah, thank you very much, Abdi, for the question. But before I answer, maybe let me also join other Kenyans in congratulating our Olympic stars.
Indeed.
Beatrice Chebet and Faith Kipyegon.
Yes.
For securing, first of all, Chebet for securing our first gold medal. And also, Beatrice, you have to keep the faith.
Yes,
you know?
Yes, you have to keep the faith.
She was disqualified, but eventually reinstated. So we are really proud of that as Kenyans. But just to answer your question, Abdi, I think ultimately what Kenyans want to see now is a lot more transparency and accountability at the forefront. I think that's generally The agitation that you mentioned from the Kenyan youth pertaining to the finance bill was really triggered by a feeling of injustice amongst the youth. Now, some of these things are not always quantifiable, but Kenyans, a lot of them, we know that there is a huge youth bulge in the country. We have at least 1 million young Kenyans that join the voting age every year. And, you know, a lot of them are unemployed. You know, they don't have any meaningful gainful employment. And that's something that is very important. So in terms of the cabinet secretaries, of course, they've gone through, 20 of them have gone through the vetting as required by our constitution with parliament. So we wait to see the outcome from that. I don't think we should take anything for granted because parliament ultimately have got to approve them. And then the president will then further appoint them.
Now, couple this with the experience you have had, especially abroad. Normally, Kenya, this has been the cabinet secretaries coming before, nominees that is, coming before the House and of course clearly stating their plans. Now, some of these cabinet secretaries are making a comeback if they are approved. What did you make of their presentation, especially they were being asked in their previous dockets that they held, or some have even been retained to their previous position, like for example the Interior CS, Professor Kithure Kindiki. So to you, as a viewer and an expert, were they convincing enough to ensure that they come back into the cabinet itself?
Well, I think the jury is out there, but you know, some of the examples you mentioned in terms of Interior, of course, we know what happened during the protests, and in terms of we did lose lives as a result of it, very unfortunately. So, you know, I think everyone is acutely aware that they're now under the microscope, especially the ones who have now come back, because the president dissolved his cabinet for a reason. You know, it wasn't just, in my view, just a knee-jerk reaction. I think the agitation had become so strong and so palpable that something had to give. So, of course, they've been given a second chance. Some of them in the same ministries, but majority of them have been assigned other ministries. So, I think it's now the onus is on them to deliver and to really show or justify the kind of faith the president had on them, and that's why he reappointed them. Of course, in other mature democracies out there, you know, people merely on an allegation would step aside. They don't wait even to go through the full log of the process. But we know our laws. You know, you're innocent until proven guilty, which is fair enough. But you know, I think now it's a question of returning back the trust to the Kenyan people, and especially the youth. They're out there, they're watching. They want to see Kenya changing. They really want to see, and I think we're hoping that this approach that the president has gone for, of the broad-based government, yields the necessary results.
Given that he said it will not be business as usual.
Absolutely.
But you just clearly stated something that is very important. If in those mature democracies, if a cabinet secretary, even a whiff or even a statement in terms of in the contention of the integrity, they step aside, should that even be the yardstick we should be using here in the country so as to solve some of these issues? It does not reach to the extent we have seen so far for the last 1 month.
Certainly. I think that's where Kenya should be. I think we are a work in progress. You know, we have to recognize that we are, you know, 61 years in post independence. But ultimately, yes, we need to have accountability. Needs to be at such a high threshold that, you know, you're putting country first instead of self-interest. You are really looking and determining, and also you're not waiting to be ushered out. You're actually saying, okay, I love my country so much that, you know, my position is not the most important thing. You know, it's the progress of the country, and if for any reason, rightly or wrongly, the courts will determine, there are issues, then yeah, I'll step aside and I'll let due process obviously take its course. But at least morals, ethics, accountability is right up there at the forefront. I think that's where Kenya ultimately should go. Some would argue that's a sign of weakness. I don't think so personally. I look at it as the highest level of integrity, and it's important. It'll take time, but I'm confident that we'll get there. And also, if you contrast ourselves with other countries around, obviously Kenya is a leader in many ways, in many ways, in the energy sector, in tourism, in technology, and so on. But also, at least we can see that we're Africans at the end of the day, and to cut us some slack, obviously what we are doing is also resonating in other parts of Africa, Nigeria, and so on. So yeah, but that's certainly the way to go.
And in the spirit of transparency you've just alluded to earlier on, the president clearly stated that in the coming days, they'll be thinking of changing various acts that guide in combating this vice corruption, which has been a major issue in the country, especially the conflict of interest bill that is currently before the House. The members of the National Assembly had to tweak it a little bit and reject some of the amendments that were made in the Senate. So aside from changing those bills, do you think we have the goodwill to enforce those rules? And because we have been seeing in the past people just getting a slap on the wrist and then they move on, yet public coffers have not been spent prudently. So in the essence of transparency and accountability, should the president be focusing on this so much, including the cabinet secretaries, when it comes to public resources? Because at the end of the day, if we don't protect the public resources, how are we going to develop?
Yeah. No, I mean, that is a no-brainer. I think we need, now more than ever, we need to prudently use our resources. I mean, you've already seen the finance bill of 2024 has been rejected, and also the act that governed 2023 as well, with the court ruling. So, we are at crossroads. We need to really prudently use our resources. I don't even think it's optional. It's not a matter of choice, because we need to see a cut in government's spending in every sense of the word. I think you look around, and that's part of the agitation that the youth had. It's from what they see, sort of the opulence and lavish way of living, and then they're stuck there in very difficult situations. They can't get a job. They can't even get an interview to give them a chance to get a job. So certainly we need to go down that route. We know that obviously the biggest crisis we face probably, aside from corruption, is the huge debt that we have as a country, over 10 trillion Kenya shillings. And that's money that's, it's accruing interest, and the interest needs to be paid year on year. So, if you're going to get out of this, then we need prudent use of resources across the board, on all ministries, all state departments, and the example should be set right from the top.
And of course, if you just rightly put it, we're talking about unemployment, which has also been a major issue that has come out from the protests that we have witnessed in the country for the last 1 month, that has brought all these changes we're witnessing, including a new cabinet in place, if approved by the National Assembly. So what are these other key areas that the government might have missed to create these opportunities, especially for these CS nominees who are coming into offices?
Yeah. I think we should leverage a lot on technology. Technology is an enabler. It cuts across different sectors, different industries. The one I'm familiar with mostly, the transport, energy, as you mentioned, and so on.
Yes.
You can leverage really on a lot of technology in delivering government services. We've already seen that with e-citizen and so on. But also you can leverage on technology in performing certain functionalities. If I give example of mass transportation, we don't really have mass transportation at the moment. I would say in the sense of the word of mass transport for the public good, because public transportation really is a service for the public good. But how technology can help reduce preferage and wastage is, for example, installing things like, let's say if we had buses, electronic ticketing machines, which means that you don't have to carry cash around and so on. So things like those. Technology really is the key area, I think, that we can touch on, that we should be looking to adopt to make things more efficient and more seamless for government operations.
Before we delve into transport itself, you're talking about digital, especially given that the government has been focusing on the digital superhighway. We have even seen the government clearly stating there are more opportunities online, especially from companies who are seeking to hire. And essentially you don't have to go to those countries, but you can work from here. Even the president giving an example of somebody in the country working for an AI company in Germany. But the ICT hubs that the government has been clearly stating that they will be put up in every ward. So in essence, essentially solving the issue of connectivity first, availability to this youth. When it comes to the digital content creation, what other key ingredient would you say should be incorporated so that it can make the work of these youths easier?
Yeah, I think, well, I think first of all, just to touch on your earlier point about, so we need the digital infrastructure spread across the country so that it's accessible to a lot of people, because like I said, it cuts across a lot of industries, in fishing, in agriculture, in transportation, in energy, and so on and so forth. And also in the creative space, you're saying digital content creators. I think we just need to have, of course, the platform there for them. We need to train them as well. Let's not take away training and upskilling as part of it, because technology is only as good as the people who use them. And technology is not a substitute for human skill or human resource. It's not about taking jobs away. It's actually enabling people to perform their jobs better. So the element of onboarding, training, capacity building is important, in a very cost-effective way. But yeah, so the digital content creators and such others can benefit from that.
Now, in comparison, given that you have gone to many countries, you have seen how their digital superhighway is working in terms of connectivity now, moving to the 5G itself. So what advice would you give the new nominee of ICT, that is Margaret Ndugu, who will be, if approved by Parliament, will be taking over the seat? Yeah,
I think... from my understanding, we tend to get caught up a lot in policies and legislation and so on, and the speed of action is curtailed as a result. So I think my first advice is have an actionable plan of how we can, and then have youth at the center of your deployment. Have an actionable plan on how you're looking to actually roll out internet connectivity across the country. Yeah, internet is now a basic need as far as I'm concerned. Everyone has the right to have internet and to access information, because you can even see sometimes maybe yourselves as broadcasters, you see information is distributed across other channels a lot quicker sometimes. So yeah, and of course, for that to happen, the infrastructure has to be on the ground. Electricity has to be there. We are talking about we are talking about the internet when not everywhere is electrified in the country. So yeah, so there's that. So it's more of an actionable plan, and work collaboratively with other relevant ministries. In consultation, because yes, there may be autonomous ministries, but I think they work together, and they obviously have cabinet which sit and deliberate on such issues. So my advice is to really get going and make sure that the plan is actionable and realizable for the young Kenyan youth who are waiting with bated breath to see what will happen.
Yeah. Now, talking of the cost of electricity, which has been a bone of contention here in the country for so many years, the previous cabinet secretary, that is Davis Chirchir, who has now been appointed to the transport docket as a nominee, if approved by Parliament, he will be he will oversee the transportation sector. But going back to the energy sector, that will be, if approved by the House, that will be the minority leader, Opiyo Wandayi, who will be taking over that particular docket. In terms of the cost of electricity, we have had various ministers or cabinet secretaries, I should say, in that particular docket. When they come to the public, they assure that the cost of electricity will go down. What do you think is the missing factor to reach that particular goal?
You know, first of all, we're in a very enviable situation as Kenya, because a lot of our energy is actually renewable.
Renewable, yes.
Yeah, over 90%. So really that is the best place to start. That's where we should be starting, really. And then secondly, we need to look at the amount of maybe taxation that is lumped in fuels, because also petroleum is covered as part of that docket. And also some of the tariffs that we charge, you know, they're quite high, even if you compare with some of our neighboring countries, you know. So why is that? You know, what is causing that? So I think the new the CS nominee, or obviously if he's approved, has to look into that and make some difficult decisions. Yeah, you know, I don't know what happens, but when, like you said, when they sit on the hot seat and they're there and things don't move, you know, I think they have to make the difficult decisions. We need to harmonize our tariffs and make use of majority of the renewable energy that we have as a country, that we shouldn't take for granted.
And clearly this is a hot seat because, you know, after when it goes to the 14th day of the month, every year we have an April review. The fuel prices normally right now is going downwards.
Absolutely.
But how can we ensure that it stays there so that it doesn't have to reach where it was initially, to the likes of 200 Kenya shillings for petrol?
Exactly. And also not just depend on external factors, because, for example, you know, some of the drop we were seeing was characterized by you know, the improvement of the Kenya shilling and the weakening of the dollar. So we were actually buying a lot cheaper than we were before, which had a net effect. But I don't think we've adequately and comprehensively addressed you know, some of the tariffs and some of the taxes that are lumped in there. I think we need to look into that categorically and decide which ones, you know, how can we harmonize it, basically, and which ones are actually relevant. Yes, you know, we know about the road development levy fund and so on, but which other ones are more, you know, they're basically hiking the cost, which also has a ripple effect, because now when you're buying kerosene at a higher price than normal, it also affects your cooking at home and so on.
Okay, I'm coming back to you. I need to take our viewers live to Paris. I do understand our very own Bernard Okumu is live there. Okumu, good to see you and good to have you. Kindly tell us what happened yesterday, because we saw we won gold and silver when it comes to the 5,000 meters. How is Faith Kipyegon and Chebet feeling, as well as Mary Mora? Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. Now we are entering the final stretch of this conversation. I want to quickly toss it to Brian. As we wind up, Brian, we're talking about the transport sector, given that the CS nominee, that is Chirchir, if approved by Parliament, will be taking over. A very crucial sector that the government has been focusing on. We need to talk about the pending bills that are currently outstanding, major road networks that are still pending, especially coupling it with what has happened to the finance bill. We do know that the pending projects now will suffer a blow, given that the funds that were meant to go and complete these projects are not now available. The government has to reconstitute or reallocate some of the funds that were meant to go to other sectors. And also in the housing sector, we're seeing CS Alice Wahome making a comeback if approved by the House, which she has been steering the affordable housing project you know, with PS Hinga. So what are the fates of these two key sectors, and especially those projects, these key projects the government is banking on to, of course, ensure that its legacy is up there?
Yeah, I think if we start with housing, especially on the affordable housing project, you know, of course, you know, Kenya, of course, we have a shortage of affordable housing, and unlike most other, let's say, developed nations, our housing is actually targeting the poor people. In other more developed markets, it's actually a campaign point because it's mostly for the middle class, middle to upper.
Yes.
But to answer your question directly, first of all, you can't sort out affordable housing without looking at transportation. Because how do you get people to go for employment, to schools? How do the children get to school? How do they get to hospital or medical facilities, and so on and so forth? So the two need to be looked at holistically, yeah? Instead of silos of affordable housing and transportation. I think we need to, both ministries maybe need to come up with a more of grander vision, especially in the bulging cities and towns across the country. And secondly, on the pending bills, yes, we know that there is a lot of pending bills, especially in the road sector. So yes, the PPP model is an effective model. We all wax lyrical about the expressway which we use, and it cuts the commute time and so on and so forth. But I think ultimately what Kenyans also want to see is more transparency in how we're entering into some of these arrangements. Like, for example, the JKIA PPP that was being discussed with the Indian group, Adani. So what Kenyans really want to see is a lot more transparency. Public participation is part of our constitution. Even as we look to go down that direction, I think we just need to be, we need to give Kenyans the confidence that we're doing the right things.
Maybe your final remarks, given that we have a few minutes.
Okay. So basically what I would say is I think we need to revitalize and really steer up private sector so that we can really see the private sector growth in this, because government can't do everything, and we know obviously we're in a debt crisis. We need to create more jobs for the youth, this time seriously mean it and action it, so that a lot of these youth that are agitated, that are out there, that can't even make a living, get meaningful employment that can allow them to contribute to the economy of the country. And lastly, improve the business environment in which we operate. We know a lot of small businesses really suffer from the very high taxation. So just make that better for them, reduce the number of taxes that we are lumping onto these small businesses and allow them to grow, and that will eventually spark growth in our economy. But lastly, Abdi, before I finish, I can't end without saying we really need to curb corruption in the country. That is the biggest vice that is hampering us from going forward.
Okay, I've just heard that we have been added more minutes given that we want to go to the Olympics. Now, going back to the other issues, we were talking about a key sector called the affordable housing project that the government has been banking on. It has created more employment, especially when it comes to the people who are working on those houses. The president is set to launch some of these houses in the coming days. So is transparency and accountability when it comes to distributing those houses very key?
Yes, 100%. There's no question about that. And also some of the, of course, I've had the president talk about some of the mortgage figures in terms of what people will be paying and then eventually owning their home. I don't know what qualification criteria kind of exists there. So we need to see that, like a proper policy of how you qualify for homes and what mortgage requirements, because of course it's a loan that you're taking up, that you're looking to pay off so that you own the home. So yeah, so like I said, and just to reiterate, of course, affordable, we need housing. There's no question about that. I don't think we're debating that. How we're implementing it and who gets it, because we are desirous to see Kenya actually move, and a lot of the people move into the middle class bracket, and then at that point, you know, some of these slums, of course, they're eradicated, and we have a lot of people contributing to the socio-economic development of our country.
And going back now to the transport sector, especially in these cities, we have seen traffic congestion being a very big issue here in the country. We're talking about the BRT buses that in the coming months or coming years we'll be seeing them on the roads.
Yeah.
So will this solve that particular problem, and how should the government go about it, given that this project has been there or being proposed to be there for a number of years now?
Yeah, I don't think BRT itself will solve the problem, because if you look at the 5 lines that have been drawn up in the Nairobi metropolis, covering the 5 BRT areas, I think the capacity is somewhere between 700 to 1,000 buses. And already in Nairobi alone, we have about 20,000 matatus that operate on a day-to-day basis. So what would really help tackle the problem of congestion is an infusion or an integration between BRT buses and some of the matatus that we have. How can you integrate to create a more seamless service? You've seen countries like Tanzania who've deployed, the BRT buses. Yes, they call it Mwendo Kasi there. It has been effective and it has helped them even attract more funding. But of course, the grander vision, as far as I'm concerned, would be an integration of the two. But yes, we need to also see mass transportation, more importantly. And it's not just buses, by the way, it's also the commuter rail. Because one wagon can carry the capacity of about 20 buses, depending on how it's the spec of the wagon. So yeah, and also non-motorized public transport, by the way. Walking lanes, cycling lanes, which also have other health benefits as well, and reduce the carbon emission that's emitted in the country.
Yes, and of course that was one of the key conversations that was happening in the country, especially when Kenya hosted the ACS 2023. It was among the key resolutions that were made in the Nairobi Declaration that were taken thereafter to the biggest seminar that was happening in Dubai. Should that also be focused here in the country when it comes to now Kenya adopting to electronic vehicles that we have seen in many other parts of the country? Now, do we have the infrastructure to sustain that?
Probably the answer is no, to the levels that we need. But still, there's been some good work, and I like the fact that the private sector are really pushing this. There's a number of bus OEMs, Basigo, Rome, and so on, who are, we already have actually electric buses. We also have the bicycles, the e-bikes, the e-motorbikes, and so on. So yes, it's definitely EV over a period of time is a lot more economical, and also we need to really be cognizant of the carbon emissions that are constantly being emitted in the cities and also globally. Which is also, that's why you're seeing such adverse effects. Like in Europe, they were saying last month was the hottest month in history. And it's all...
You've even seen Okumu there clearly stating that
absolutely.
Europe currently is very hot.
Absolutely, even Okumu is suffering as a result. So yes, we definitely should go, and we are going more EV. I think what the private sector would appreciate is also that support from government. In terms of incentives, in terms of cheaper tariffs for charging, whether it's during the day and at night, and so on and so forth. And just policies that obviously makes the adoption a lot quicker and easier.
And of course, traffic rules, adherence to them has been a very big issue here in the country. When it comes to the societal awareness in terms of these traffic rules that we need to look out for, especially when we have various foreigners coming into the country, we have tourists coming here into the country. What needs to change so that the discipline on the roads can be up to par? You have seen we have had numerous accidents on the road. We have seen many vehicles, especially public service vehicles and other private ones who are not up to standards. They are still on the roads. So what needs to change, and should that be the key focus of this nominee who's coming to office?
Yeah, I think the attitude, people's attitude as they drive definitely needs to change. I don't know what happens when somebody sits behind that steering wheel. All of a sudden they become very agitated, and they want to overtake everybody, and they want to get ahead of the queue. So I think the attitude, number one, needs to change in terms of everybody, so that we can actually respect and adhere to traffic lights, traffic lanes, and so on. And then secondly, of course, in terms of the nominee that's coming in, of course they need to look at how public transport is regulated. You remember the Mishuki days?
Yes.
And some of the enforcements that he put in, even in terms of safety belts. He was, you know, he was a no-nonsense person, and he took no prisoners in his quest to streamline and improve public transport. So I think we need to see some of that, you know, somebody really taking decisive, firm action to make sure that we curb and we reduce the accidents and the carnage that we're having in the roads, because it's very unfortunate in terms of the statistics and the number of people we lose due to accidents.
And of course, curbing that with the climate change that we have been talking here in the country, you know, we have had the floods that we have been witnessing early on this year. We have seen many roads being damaged. Even in the last few months we have been having, especially in the capital, rains, the drainage system, stormwater drainage systems are filled to the brim. We have been having potholes on the road. Despite the county governments filling up those potholes at the end of the day, and with the withdrawal of the Finance Bill 2024, should it now be areas of priority that should be financed when it comes to maintaining these roads, especially major highways that is interconnecting many parts of our country?
Yeah, certainly. Yes, and of course, yeah, we were unfortunate with the floods and obviously the damage that were done. But yes, we should rehabilitate some of these roads and major infrastructures, bridges and so on that have been damaged as a result. And maybe also look to introduce some sort of maintenance policy against such adverse weather effects. Maybe regularly look into some of our bridges infrastructure, because I know a lot of them they're installed, yes, but hardly ever maintained. So they can't cope with the rigors or some of the issues that we have, especially external issues. So we need to be looking at those as well. And in your final remarks also, you can talk about what are key recommendations, especially policy-wise, because, you know, as a country, we do know that there are good policies, but at the end of the day, they are not implemented. So what needs to change, especially when it comes to our governance system, to ensure that some of these key policies are achieved and implemented, especially in these key sectors of transport, housing, telecommunication and energy, as we wind up? So as we wind up, I'd say, of course, let's look at, like I said, starring the private sector and allowing the private sector to come in, contribute, also finance, help to finance rather, some of these key projects that we're looking to do as a country, and also complete a lot of these pending bills, or pending projects, I should say, because we do start projects and then we're not able to see them through. And of course, you've already borrowed quite a significant amount of resources. For that, then you're being taken to court and so on and so forth. So we should have a policy in place that looks at both the existing or the pending projects that we have, and also look at how we can collaboratively work with the private sector so that we can faster the development that we are looking to realize as a country. Thank you so much. That is Brian Mongera, a governance and policy expert, just taking us through the road of the fate of the cabinet nominees who are vetted, and the vetting exercise concluded on a Sunday. Awaiting to be vetted are two other nominees, one an Attorney General and the CS for the East African Community and Regional Development, was said to be vetted this Friday by the Moses Wetangula-led committee. Now, quickly, just before we take a breather and then take you live to Paris, we just gotten a rundown of how the day is looking for Kenya, especially after we got 2 medals in the 5,000, a gold and a silver, and also in the 800 meters women's race, our very own Mary Mora was able to scoop a bronze. And good news for Team Kenya is that Amos Serem has been included in the list of the athletes who will compete in the 3,000 meter steeplechase final after an appeal by Team Kenya. He had been forced off the track as he approached the penultimate water jump. Now, of course, the other schedule is in just a few minutes. We'll be having the heats of 1,500, and our very own again, Faith Kipyegon, Nelly Chepchirchir and Susan Ejore will be competing in that, and Julia Siego in the men's javelin throw qualification at 11:20. And in the evening, that is, of course, we'll have another fresh round of our athletes who will
expect to be cheering on is that Timothy Cheriot at exactly 7:50 p.m. and Brian Komen in the men's 1,500 meters final. At 9:50, we'll be having our very own Faith Cherotich and Beatrice Chepkoech in the women's 3,000 meters steeplechase final at 10:14 p.m. And then finally closing off the night, it will be basketball quarterfinals, the United States of America against Brazil. And after that, we'll be having boxing and then finish off the day with track cycling. Our very own Bernard Okumu is there, and we have an able team here in the sports desk here in the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation who will be informing you in our subsequent bulletins. My name is Abdiaziz Hashim. The sign language interpreter at the bottom end of the screen is Anne Wangeshi. We're taking a short breather. Don't go too far. We are taking you live to Paris any moment from now.